Hello everyone and welcome back to Versus, the show that takes art and makes it competitive, especially in today's case. We'll take two A-list filmographies and see which one looks better in a tux or at the poker table, and especially saving the world. That is when, they're not recharging in the bedroom.
Well, everybody needs a hobby.
I'm your host, Mark Ellis, and I'm not sure James Bond ever got 8 hours of sleep, but he has been played in recent years by two critically acclaimed and audience-approved actors that have delighted fans around the globe with their distinguished takes on 007.
Is that a compliment?
It's a ballyhooed Bond brawl featuring Pierce Brosnan and Daniel Craig right now on Versus. Of course, Pierce and Daniel won't be here in studio. They're way too busy with upcoming projects outside of MI6. And while Jimmy Bond will factor heavily into how this match plays out, this is a contest that accounts for the sum total of Brosnan and Craig's career highlights. In one corner, we have Pierce Brosnan.
What, no small talk? No chit-chat?
Who, after missing out on playing Bond in the mid-'80s, took up the mantle in 1995 with Goldeneye before it became a video game, and would go on to make 3 more super spy adventures into the new millennium. In the other corner, it's Daniel Craig, who may not have looked the classic Bond part when he was cast in 2006's Casino Royale, but we all quickly forgot about that and would enjoy 4 more 007 outings all the way up through 2021's No Time to Die, the final Bondian effort for Craig. Both embodied the legendary character and made him their own. Now, it's time for the sky to fall for one, as the world is not enough for both. Here's how we'll determine a winner. Round 1, box office. Round 2, Tomatometer / audience score. Round 3, iconic roles. Round 4, powder. And then we'll do a wildcard round that could involve Bond villains, 007 romances, or stuff that M has no clue about, like investigating homicides, run by fruitings, or the ultimate sin, bad karaoke. Your host, this guy, goes way back with both top talents. So I first discovered Craig in a cool flick called Layer Cake. Then he goes and books the role of James Bond.
Yes, I know that.
And even before Brosnan appeared in Mrs. Doubtfire, I remember him from the Stephen King VR thriller, The Lawnmower Man. Remember that movie? Stephen King didn't like it. He actually sued to have his name removed from the title. But the future, man, it looked cool in the early 90s. James Bond, now he's always ahead of the technological curve, and his flicks go all the way back in time to the early 1960s. As a matter of fact, last season, right here on Versus, we did a Bond bash to determine who really is the best of the bunch. Was it Connery, Craig, Brosnan? You gotta watch that episode. I can't give away classified British intelligence.
I wouldn't dream of it.
But it came down to the wire, as I imagine this battle will as well. Look, Ethan Hunt is great. Johnny English is a legendary name in my household, but there's no substitute for Bond, James Bond. Martinis are on the way, the poker cards are dealt, let's get it on.
We'll get on with it then. Nothing can be as painful as listening to you talk.
Round 1, box office. I'd forgive those of you who might have assumed that Pierce and Danny, I shouldn't call him.
I am the future. So don't you ever talk to me that way again.
Yeah, Pierce and Daniel didn't make a dent in the box office until they were on the posters for Goldeneye and Casino Royale, respectively. But, like so many villains hell-bent on world domination, you'd be wrong. For Brosnan, a start on stage, thanks to none other than Tennessee Williams in person, proved that he could act. Then a successful run on the TV hit Remington Steele showed that he could carry a franchise, maybe a little too well. You see, he was a frontrunner for the role of 007 for the movie The Living Daylights, but couldn't make it work with the TV schedule, so instead, Bond was rebooted with Timothy Dalton at the helm. But in the early 1990s, Brosnan had a modest hit with The Lawnmower Man. And it's, how much? It only made $32 million. Worldwide? Man, everyone in my class was talking about it. It had Job, the future, everything.
It doesn't work like that.
And then Juvenile Doubtfire came along in late 1993 and wooed its way to a $441 million take, which is still good for second all-time on Pierce's theater-going receipts list. Number 1, well, duh, it's got to be a Bond movie, right? What is it, Goldeneye? Or The World Is Not Enough? Tomorrow Never Dies? Die Another Day? Nope, it's the other Bond movie, Mamma Mia!
Maybe you've been down here too long.
Which I'm now being told is not, in fact, 007 canon. It came out in 2008 alongside fellow cinematic legends like The Dark Knight and Space Chimps, and Mamma Mia would go on to make $598 million. People love ABBA, especially when those songs are as wonderfully sung as Pierce does.
One rises to meet a challenge.
Beauty is in the ear of the beholder.
Well, We know where you stand.
Brosnan did do quite well with his spy-rific run. Goldeneye re-established the character for generations new and old, earning $356 million globally. Tomorrow Never Dies almost matched its big brother with $339 million. The World Is Not Enough just eked past the golden one with $361 million. And Die Another Day, Brosnan's final Bond outing in 2002, raked in $431 million in negotiable bearer bonds, the preferred currency of action movie bad guys everywhere.
Want money? What kind of terrorists are you?
Then there's this Daniel Craig lad. To many, he was an unknown quantity when he landed the gig for Casino Royale, but the reality is, he'd been a part of some hugely successful cinematic undertakings already. Can I interest anyone in Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, starring Angelina Jolie, and Danny Craig?
I suppose you think I'm a greedy, unscrupulous sellout and do just about anything for money.
It made $273 million back in 2001, when Pierce was still Bond, and the very next year, Craig played a loose cannon type in Road to Perdition alongside Tom Hanks and Paul Newman. That movie would end up grossing $183 million. But unlike Brosnan, Daniel Craig's box office resume does feature 007 at the very top. His 5 best movies, in terms of moviegoers buying tickets, are all Bond adventures. Skyfall did over $1 billion worth of business, the only Bond movie ever to achieve such a feat. Spectre took in $879 million. No Time to Die amassed $760 million after over a year sitting on a pandemic-mandated shelf. Casino Royale kicked us off with a sterling $594 million, and Quantum of Solace brings up the rear with $591 million. So Craig appears to have the dollars and cents advantage over Brosnan in terms of spy adventures, but how about outside the world of Q and his incredible gadgets?
Does it do anything?
It tells the time.
Remember Brosnan has Mamma Mia and Mrs. Doubtfire. Can Craig match? Let's go to the world of animation. The Adventures of Tintin earned $373 million, and we don't talk about that movie enough. The Golden Compass brought in $367 million, and we talk about that movie an appropriate amount.
That is hooey.
The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo did $239 million. Cowboys and Aliens, another $176 million. But the difference in this round might come down to another character of Daniels that seems to be heading towards a full-on franchise.
Enter Benoit Blanc.
A new Knives Out adventure hits Netflix this year. The first one cut up over $300 million in theaters. Okay, so Pierce is on the ropes here, but he's still got some swings left. You have Percy Jackson and the Olympic Torch, whatever that movie's called, burned over $200 million worldwide, and Dante's Peak, The Foreigner, The Thomas Crown Affair, and Mars Attacks all surpassed the $100 million mark, which also seems to be James Bond's travel budget whenever he goes on a mission. Think about it. The dude travels first class, custom suits, many expensive drinks, lavish dinners with fine ladies, gambling away your and I's life savings. You know, rescuing the world really ain't cheap.
Let's toast your evaluation, shall we?
But when it all comes down to it, Pierce Brosnan films total $4.3 billion, and that's not factoring in his newest blockbuster, Black Adam. Meanwhile, the other DC, Daniel Craig, his career cinema earnings exceed $6.3 billion. His per-film average is $243 million. PB's is $111 million. So Craig has the numbers advantage in round one, and if you're a Brosnan fan screaming at your streaming device, an activity I like to call screteaming, remember this. Craig does have an uncredited cameo in Star Wars The Force Awakens, and I recall that movie doing okay. How much? $2 billion. Not that we were going to see Stormtrooper number 9, but it's a fun fact. Another one is that Daniel Craig wins this round and goes up 1-0.
You have no idea who you're dealing with.
Round 2, Tomatometer / audience score. And now we head to the newspapers.
Hold the presses. This just in.
In addition to telling you what movies were playing where, when, they'd also have reviews of said films, usually on a Thursday or Friday from top critics.
There's no news like bad news.
It was a very simple and convenient way to start your day. But now, of course, we have the ease of online news, information, people yelling at each other. There's a whole generation out there that has no clue how to tidily fold a newspaper and leave it in the bathroom. But today's tech also has blessed us with the Tomatometer, a handy guide for how a wide swath of pro-film pundits felt about a flick, and the audience score, an aggregate of how regular Joe Schmo moviegoers were leaning after seeing a movie. And while Bond is a top-line credit for both Brosnan and Craig, it might come down to their other work that decides the victor in this round. Daniel Craig gets off to a hot start in the tomato patch with a slew of hits that are at least 90%, including 2 007 tales. Casino Royale's at 94%, Skyfall is 92%. You can also brag about Logan Lucky's 92%, or his all-time top score, which is 97% for Knives Out.
Sounds about right.
That's also the high mark for Brosnan, but that was for a film in the early 80s called The Long Good Friday. What the hell is that? Well, in addition to being one of Brosnan's first ever roles, it also starred Bob Hoskins and Helen Mirren. All right, I'm listening. Excuse me, Dame Helen Mirren. But Pierce would never recapture the magic of The Long Good Friday, in which he played First Irishman, at least in terms of Tomatometer score. But he does have the Ghost Rider at 84%, Goldeneye's at 80%, and the second Mamma Mia is at 79%. The first one? Oh, I'm glad you asked, because, oh no. Oh boy, it's rotten at 55%. I'll now pause 10 seconds while many of you regain consciousness. And as a reminder, my podcast, Rotten Tomatoes is Wrong, is here to help. We defend rotten movies we love, like Mamma Mia, or its theater companion in the summer of 2008, Space Chimps, which is unfairly maligned at 33%. And while Brosnan has plenty more freshness in his bag of tricks, like Tommy Crown and His Affair at 70%, and The Matador at 74%, Goldeneye is his only fresh outing as Bond.
Numbers were never my strong suit.
Die Another Day and Tomorrow Never Dies are tied at 56%, and The World Is Not Enough is the low bar at 51%, despite starring Denise Richards as a rocket scientist named Dr. Christmas Jones. 007, you're incorrigible.
Always wanted to have Christmas in Turkey.
Craig was more consistently fresh with his Bond outings, including Quantum of Solace at 64%, Spectre at 63%, and No Time to Die at 83%. The dude went out on top. Munich is at 78%, and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoos at 86%. It seems like Craig is inching towards another battle won here in round 2, so let's go to the law of averages. Daniel is fresh, that is with the audience. 65% is his average over there, thanks to Knives Out and Casino Royale staying in the 90s. But his Tomatometer average is just rotten at 59%. Maybe Glass Onion gets him into good-smelling territory. So now the door is open for Pierce Brosnan, who's competitive on the audience score metric with a 52% average, thanks to Goldeneye and both Mamma Mia films being fresh here. Plus, you guessed it, The Long Good Friday. On the audience score, 89%. We all gotta watch this movie. It's a crowd pleaser, critical darling, big stars. It's got it all. But is that enough to get Brosnan to fresh with his Tomatometer average? To quote Judge Judy, 48% is his average there, and unfortunately, I think I know why. So in addition to his James Bond films getting sillier around his class, The Lawnmower Man is also rotten at just 37%. What? I guess you're not ready for that yet, but your kids are gonna love it. Wait, the audience score is 31%? I don't understand people anymore. Take me to space with the rest of the chimps. Daniel Craig wins another round and suddenly has a 2-0 lead.
I know this seems terrible, but let's not be too rash.
Round 3, iconic roles. Well, we know the name that's going to kick off this phase, right? We're all in agreement? Pierce Brosnan and Daniel Craig could go on in their careers to play fictional icons like the Easter Bunny or Freddy Krueger, or real-life people like Leonardo da Vinci or Santa Claus, but they're always going to be most remembered for playing the coolest spy of them all,
Bond. James Bond.
Brosnan rescued the franchise when it was on the ropes, and when his run of movies started to get a little too silly, Daniel Craig ushered in a brawnier, more rough-around-the-edges Bond that was needed for that time.
Name? Bond. James Bond.
So if they were both just this one character, we'd have a tie on our hands. But round 3, it's about the entirety of one's career and all these characters that these professional thespians have inhabited, and they're going to check into the ballgame.
Let's play ball.
First up, possibly a new franchise star, Benoit Blanc.
Mr. Blanc, if you please.
A mix of Colonel Sanders and Foghorn the Leghorn.
You're a pack of vultures at the feast. Knives Out, beaks bloody.
Courtesy of Daniel Craig in Knives Out. Craig has also donned a fun accent for quality films like Logan Lucky, but in the Knives Out series, he's the detective whose unusual methods make for an enthralling, suspenseful, and very funny mystery-solving romp.
A case with a hole in the middle. A donut.
What an achievement to play a role that is equal parts scene-stealing funny man and movie-anchoring lead with such a plump. I have a feeling that Glass Onion will not be the last time we welcome Benoit into our living quarters. But if Bond was the ultimate role for both actors, what better training than as a thief turned private investigator in the popular 80s show Remington Steele? Brosnan's character might have been on the opposite side of the law that Jimmy Bond is, but Pierce demonstrated a panache, a smoothness, and a suit-wearing confidence that felt so positively 007. Even the pilot episode was dubbed License to Steal. But on the big screen, it wasn't until Mrs. Doubtfire that Brosnan would be a memorable face, and one scene in particular sealed the deal.
It was a run by fruiting.
He's the new beau on the block, and old pal of Sally Fields, and her ex-husband, Robin Williams, is having none of it. But I can also sing his praises as Dr. Lawrence Angelo in The Lawnmower Man, since apparently none of you will. 31% from you, the audience, and I trusted you. Job trusted you. So Jeff Fahey plays the lawn care guy who's low on the IQ chart but keen on following Angelo's experiments within the realm of virtual reality and psychoactive drugs that improve his cognitive abilities drastically.
I was born dumb.
Pooh hits the fan, and the story does bear such little resemblance to Stephen King's original tale that King successfully sued to have his name removed from the film's title. But the end scene? All the phones start ringing? It's good stuff. Definitely at least 50% worthy on the Tomatometer. Craig can be wonderful in starring roles like Layer Cake and Defiance, but he can also hit home runs with smaller parts, like the quick-to-violence Connor in Road to Perdition, or as Steve in Munich. But Brosnan's range seems to be a bit wider, as he can go from villainous, like in The Foreigner, to mysterious, as with The Tailor of Panama, to just outright goofy with Mamma Mia.
Yeah, my sentiments exactly.
Of course, when these fellas get in their action wheelhouse, like in The Thomas Crown Affair or Cowboys and Aliens, they're pretty tough to beat. So Brosnan gets the edge here simply because he's had more time in his career, pre- and post-Bond, to ingratiate us to creations that would run the gamut at your local Blockbuster Video. I mean, the guy helped us avert two disasters, kinda, in back-to-back years, with 1996's Mars Attacks.
This could be a cultural misunderstanding.
And then 1997's Dante's Peak. That's enough for me to award Pierce his first victory of the afternoon, and now he's on the board. It's 2-1.
Look in my eyes. I can beat this man, you know that.
Round 4, Powder. Yes, sometimes I have a very good time naming these rounds something vague or mysterious or even dangerous, like a scintillating Bond adventure. And so this phase is called Powder because we're going to decipher who is the best 007 between Craig and Brosnan. The gold Bond, if you will. Keeps you dry, fresh, and shaken, not stirred. Before I run through each iteration of James Bond and why it's wonderful, I'll remind you that both of these dudes were more than just another good super spy. They were essential and came along at the exact time the franchise needed them the most. I'm a guy who's easy to please, too. Connery might be the best, Roger Moore was great in his era, and George Lazenby could actually fight. But I'm also a fan of Timothy Dalton's work in the role, although by the time License to Kill was released in 1989, it felt like James Bond and all of his wonderful toys, signatures, and charm had run its course. So the property did what seems to be harder to do these days. It took a vacation, a long one. It went to go get its groove back, and when it returned in the mid-90s, the goal was to go as classic as possible while simultaneously updating the characters and feel for a new decade. Thus, whoever's going to be stepping into the tux had to have a timeless quality that could captivate multiple generations with their personality. Enter Pierce Brosnan. He was perfect and at just the right time. Impossibly handsome, endlessly charming, and with just the right notes of sensitivity and toughness.
Standard operating procedure.
Brosnan revitalized James Bond at a time when action movies were increasingly about the biggest guy and the most muscles and how they rescue us from a Die Hard-like plot.
It's too easy.
So much like Kiss reuniting in 1996 for a giant stadium tour to show all the young rockers how it's done, 1995's Goldeneye reminded moviegoers that a spy adventure can have it all. Action, music, romance, comedy, one-liners, and a sprawled-out worldwide stage to play on. And sometimes outer space. But like all new things, the newness and cool would wear off, and by the time Die Another Day was released in 2002, Bond felt like he was jumping multiple sharks in each film. Some sequences bordered on parody, and the missions themselves felt so fantastical that all shreds of reality vanished faster than a silly car could disappear. In short, the franchise needed another reset. But where do you go from possibly the smoothest, most debonair Bond of all time? The complete opposite direction. Step right up, Daniel Craig. This 007 was as much a Bourne as he was a Bond.
Don't skate.
A raw nerve whose fighting style felt like it belonged in a UFC title fight or a parkour championship. Daniel Craig's James could clean up if he had to, but he felt much more at home in a Hawaiian shirt or boozing deep into the night on a beach.
I'll drink to that.
If the Pierce Brosnan film set harkened back to the bygone era of epic adventure, the Daniel Craig movies took the modern action cue from other franchises and forged ahead of them all. Brosnan's Bond could swig a martini, wine and dine in bed, but still be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to go the next morning.
Family motto.
Conversely, Craig's 007 looked like he hadn't slept at all the night before, and the lack of rest might have been due to his own demons rather than a swinging night with a fetching vixen.
We all have our secrets. We just didn't get to yours yet.
So how do you pick who's the better Bond? Both came along at the right time with their brand of powder, if you will. But the Brosnan era set up the Craig run to be bold and different. As much as I wasn't a fan of the direction the later Pierce films took, he himself was always right for the role, and that's why the flicks kept making box office bank. The proverbial baton passing was so much smoother from Brosnan to Craig because we were ready for a new take.
Suppose that's something.
But in 1995, when Goldeneye hit, it was the most flawless melding of the Bond that we knew and the James that could function in a much more technologically savvy era. Daniel Craig reinvented the role by making it his own, but Pierce Brosnan topped that feat by reinvigorating the vintage 007 and refreshing the concept at the same time. If his Bond didn't quite get over with the fans, we're probably discussing this entire franchise in the way past tense. And for that, Pierce Brosnan edges ahead of Daniel Craig in this round, takes the battle, and ties the match at 2-2.
I want to meet your employer.
And now it's time for the wild card round. Relax. This final round that will determine the winner is more chill for a couple of reasons. One, I know a lot of Daniel Craig honks are yelling at me through their streaming device, again called screaming, because I didn't give their boy the win in round 4. So let me be clear here and now. The Craig movies as a whole are better than the Brosnan ones, but Pierce, I feel, is a slightly better classic Bond. But now we relax by taking off the tuxes and donning other costumes that might function well in movies not set in the James Bond universe. This round will be won by whoever has the most memorable moments outside of the clandestine walls of MI6. So Pierce Brosnan is still going to take an early lead here with the run by fruiting. I mean, come on, we still all say it, right? Hell, I think of it every time I'm in the produce section, and occasionally I'm tempted to toss one myself. Brosnan plays Stu, who isn't a bad guy, he's just not Dad. And so we enjoy watching him fidget and struggle through dates with Sally Field and company. We don't want to kill the guy, I'll make that clear, but plunking him in the back of the head with fruit or over-peppering his dinner, that's semi-harmless fun, right?
What can I say, Ron? The guy's a loser.
Pierce is also a smooth operator on the other side of the law in the Thomas Crown affair, and multiple sequences show him off to be a master of thievery and the heart.
Well, it's very nice.
The Matador reminded us where margaritas taste the best, and for all you shark lovers out there, like our expert researcher here on the show, Mark Hoffmeyer, there's a lot of good fin action. Meanwhile, Daniel Craig got started with some iconic moments well before he was James Jason Bond.
Are you enjoying this?
Layer Cake would kind of be his version of a Thomas Crown affair, but he can also get super menacing in Road to Perdition. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo relies on a slow boiling stoicism, but his intensity can quickly bring us to a simmer with scenes like the grenade assassination in Munich. And look, I'm not here to bash Pierce Brosnan singing in Mamma Mia. As a matter of fact, I loved it.
My sentiments exactly.
Because it proved that this guy's mortal after all. We finally found a slight weakness after all these years. Daniel Craig has yet to suffer that kind of career pitfall, but not for his lack of risk-taking.
You will find me a respectful, quiet, passive observer.
His accent in both Logan Lucky and Knives Out could have derailed the greatness of those movies. Instead, it made them stand out even more. The twisted web scene as he's piecing together a whodunit, or the hilarious and harrowing car chases in Logan Lucky show off a much more versatile Daniel Craig than might meet the eye. Brosnan still might be the smoothest guy on the planet, and he'll never not be a contender for People's Sexiest Man of the Year, an award he did take home in the early 2000s. Although, to be fair, that was the pre-Blake Shelton era. But Daniel Craig has already given us so many thrills, chills, and spills in a comparatively young career, so my affection for what I've already seen, and my prognostication that's somewhat optimistic for what I'm gonna see, I'm awarding this round, and thus the match, to Mr. Daniel Craig. Take a bow, sir.
Congratulations.
You know, I think a celebration's in order.
Or just swig some tequila and trap a scorpion with the glass. You be you. I'm a huge fan of both these fellas, inside and outside of an Aston Martin, BMW Z3, or any other supercharged auto they might be piloting. Both have numerous projects in the works, so maybe we run this match back in a few years. You know, when we have a new James Bond to celebrate. And keep in mind, this is all just my opinion. Now it's your turn, my beloved audience, who for some reason don't embrace the lawnmower man. Hit me up on social media with your take at Mark Ellis Live. Stay tuned right here at Rotten Tomatoes for all the latest in the world of TV, movies, and everything in between, including who may be wearing a tux in the near future. Thanks for watching Versus. I'm Mark Ellis, and unlike James Bond, I'm gonna go to bed now. Alone.